Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're going to give this a couple more minutes to let people filter in, and we'll get going in just a couple minutes. For those of you who are here, if you want to go ahead and type in your name and any information about yourself into the chat so everyone knows who's here, that would be great. Yeah, I'll just say again, for those of you who've just arrived, thank you for coming this afternoon, and we're going to give it just another minute or so to let other people arrive. In the meantime, if folks want to type in your name and any affiliation to share with others, that would be great, so we know who's with us this afternoon. Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining this latest webinar series in the Northern Forest Center's Building the New Northern Forest series. I'm Mike Wilson. I'm Senior Program Director with the Northern Forest Center. I'm happy to be here with you facilitating today's discussion. Today, our topic, as you all know, is the upcoming total solar eclipse and how rural communities across the Northern Forest are preparing to welcome potentially very large numbers of visitors and help them safely experience safely enjoy this viewing experience. This webinar series is part of the Northern Forest Center's ongoing commitment to supporting shared learning on important topics across the Northern Forest region of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York, and we appreciate you all joining us today. We selected today's topic because, again, as I think you all know, the upcoming total solar eclipse represents both a significant opportunity and a potentially significant challenge to many Northern Forest communities. Much of the region is in the path of totality for this eclipse, and based on the experiences in other parts of the country during the last eclipse 7 years ago, we know communities could be seeing, again, very large crowds of people coming to enjoy the event. We also know that those crowds have the potential to significantly challenge local capacity and infrastructure. This is especially true given the time of year that this event is happening, right in the heart of mud season, when many roads in the area are muddy. Ice on the lakes is in question. Many businesses may not be open. It's a tricky time of year for this region to host large numbers of people. So today we're pleased to welcome representatives from across the region to talk about how they and their organizations and their communities are preparing for this event, both in the context of safety and emergency planning and in the context of providing quality visitor experiences. Before we turn to the panel, a little bit of housekeeping. We'll be doing individual introductions from our 4 panelists and then a panel discussion. You can post questions at any time. Please use the Q&A function rather than the chat window. Just helps us manage things and keep track so we can be sure to field all questions given the time that we have available. Please, as many of you are doing, please do use the chat to introduce yourselves and share any resources with the group with other participants. So I'm pleased to introduce our panelists, and we'll put up a map showing where they're all located so you can see this. And we're not going east to west or west to east. We're going to jump around a little bit. We will start with Michelle Clement. She's the Director of Marketing for the Regional Office of Sustainable Tourism based in Lake Placid, New York. Next, we'll jump to New Hampshire and hear from Deborah Yeager, who's the Chief of Community and School Readiness for the New Hampshire Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Where's the rest of my notes? I do have it. Next, we'll jump over to Maine and hear from John Brennenstill. He's the training officer for the Greenville, Maine Fire Department and is serving as the local incident commander for the 2024 Eclipse in Piscataquis County, Maine. And then finally, Jillian Sawaki. She's the executive director of Discover St. Johnsbury, Vermont. We've asked each of our panelists to provide a brief introduction to themselves and how they became involved in this work and their role in the process. And with that, I think we will jump right in, and I will hand things over to Michelle to get us going. Welcome, Michelle.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for allowing me to join this webinar today. It's hard to believe that it's been well over a year now that we've been, really working diligently to prepare for the total solar eclipse. And so I just want to give a little background on myself. I am Michelle Clement. I am the Director of Marketing for ROOST, which stands for the Regional Office of Sustainable Tourism. And our main headquarters is in Lake Placid. We represent a large portion of the Adirondack Park. And we've been working with community leaders. We put together a solar eclipse task force about a year ago now with key individuals from around the region to really start these discussions and plannings. We've held, I can't even count the number of community meetings moving around. I would say we're up towards 25 or more individual community meetings, helping communities get prepared for April 8th. 2024, and that date is coming closer with 55 days to go, not to put panic out there. If you want to go through, I just have a couple quick slides, just high level. We're really talking, we're not an event organizer. We're not organizing all of the events and activities and viewing areas across the region. However, we are working with attractions, local communities to really put together a plan to help people facilitate and have a great and safe shared viewing experience. Our initial conversations and that task force led through talking with emergency management was, one of the key things they were looking for to help even put together a safety and transportation plan was, where are people going to congregate? So we really focused on and have been focusing on identifying viewing locations, events, viewing areas, parking areas, so we can really direct people around and have a solid plan there. From there, we'll talk a lot today about the 3 T's that we'll put in place for every viewing location, which is that traffic control and safety, trash, and toilets, or as we also call them, restrooms. And then if we keep moving on the slides, the other thing within the Adirondacks across the whole northern forest region here is the concern of the time of year, April 8th. To put it in perspective, here in the Adirondacks, on April 6th of 2023 was when New York State DEC put in place their advisory to stay below 2,500 feet. It could be snow, it could be ice, it's still winter in the peaks. So we've been partnering with local groups to put together our own version of Leave No Trace messaging to really make sure that if people are looking for a backcountry experience, they have the information they need to be truly prepared for the conditions they'll be experiencing, but more importantly, to really encourage them to attend community events, celebrations. I think it's really unique to say that this is that one time. It's very rare that there's a shared experience. There's a lot of events that are for one audience or another, but this truly is something that people will remember where they were and what they were doing that time they got to experience a total solar eclipse. So we want to make it a positive experience. So as we work with our communities, there's a variety of different types of events, our large attractions, for example, Whiteface Mountain and the Olympic Speed Skating Oval in Lake Placid have great festivals happening. The Adirondack Sky Center, an astronomy-based organization, the Adirondacks, has been planning for some time and is doing a multi-day celebration. The Wild Center, just to name a few. Other communities, for example, the Saranac Lake, the town of Newcomb are doing street fest type festivals. These really are unique experiences for people to come together and share that experience with others, and to make that a positive piece, and also limit and mitigate that stress on our backcountry. So we've got a lot of mapping resources available. There's a URL in the bottom here that shows where we're directing people to find that viewing area that's the right fit for them. If you want to move on. We've also been working really closely with our businesses and providing a lot of resources and toolkits, helping order glasses, an ongoing and growing list of FAQs, all available in a toolkit that's available for anyone to use these materials from within the Adirondacks. And we've been getting calls from other places that have been using these as well. Community assessment preparedness worksheets to help make sure you have the infrastructure in place as best as you can to be prepared for April 8th. And then we've created one and launched this right at the 1-year mark in 2023. Eclipse80k.com is kind of a one-stop shop to help people find that information, what to know before you come, where to watch, what events are happening. This is continuing to be populated very regularly. It also has all of the links to the resource toolkits for businesses. And so this is just an example of some of the work we've been doing and has been a major part of our program for about a year now. That is all for me for my quick introduction.
Great. Thank you,
Summarizing
Michelle.
a year in 5 minutes.
That was perfect, and thank you. It's impressive what you all are doing around this. Again, really to help make sure this is a good experience for visitors in the region. I think our next two presenters are going to be focused a little bit more on the specific work with communities to manage crowds and safety and emergency services. So now I'm going to hand it again to Debbie Yeager. As I mentioned before, she's Chief of Community and School Readiness for the New Hampshire Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. So welcome, Debbie, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So in New Hampshire, we too started planning about a year ago. We were, I'm sorry, let me introduce myself first. I'm Deb Yeager. I am Chief of Community Services at the New Hampshire Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And we have a section in our group called Stakeholder Liaisons. And these are individuals that go out and work with communities on a daily basis to help them with their preparedness. And so the solar eclipse is no different than other projects that we undertake with the communities, except that it's only happening once in a lifetime. So we started in 2023, and I was approached by the Travel and Tourism Agency in our state to look at the safety and emergency management aspects of the eclipse event. We basically, Travel and Tourism has taken all the interaction with the public to get them excited about it and get them up here. And we are looking at the safety aspect. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of our state. And it's also very small and very short on resources. In any event, or whether planned or unplanned, we here at the state of New Hampshire support the communities. We provide coordination, we provide situational awareness, but really they're the ones that are the boots on the ground responders to anything that occurs in their region. So in order to prepare for that support, we gathered people from different state agencies who work in emergency preparedness with us, from Homeland, from state police, DOT, the health department, the fire marshal's office, the Bureau of EMS, Fish and Game, state communications. And then we invited our local partners and regional groups such as a regional public health network. And we've been meeting via Teams monthly since April of 2023. We have just recently gone to bi-weekly as we grow closer. And we're discussing things such as traffic plans and health and medical resources. What kind of manpower needs do they have in these local communities? Where are they designating parking areas? Where are they designating viewing areas? There's many ski areas in the region, and they are mostly all having events to celebrate the eclipse. And so that adds to the crowds, it adds to the congestion of traffic, which is one road up and one road down, and not major highways when you get way up to the top. We have been planning for how the state will provide those supports, and if asked, if the communities need us, we want to stand by to be ready to support them. Communities have been meeting with their first responders, with their hospitals, with their schools, to make sure that everyone's on the same page. They've been working with their businesses and concerned about resources running out, like at restaurants and gas stations, and hotels are fully booked up there. They were fully booked, I would say, in the summer of last summer. So it's going to be tight, but it's going to happen. And we've been working with a public information group, a messaging group, and these you can see on the screen are our key messages. We are asking if people arrive early and stay late, then that helps with the traffic congestion. Some of the hotels are instituting, the 3-day minimums, 2-day minimums for hotel stays. So that does mitigate the traffic a bit. We're asking the public to please be prepared to take care of yourself. There are very few resources up there, and bring your food, bring your drinks, your water, extra clothes, and have an emergency kit. Carry your trash, whatever you carry in, carry it out. There's even few resources for disposing of trash. So, as Michelle mentioned, we want to keep the beautiful area pristine, and that's a key message. There could be the weather. One of the things about planning for this event is that there are many unknowns. We don't really know how many people will be there, and we don't know what the weather will be. So it's likely to be either snow and ice still, it's the very beginning of April, or in the case of a mild winter like we're having now, it could be mud season, and that would cause a whole different set of issues. So we're asking that, you consider your vehicle, what kind of vehicle can handle the snow and the ice or the mud. Adhere to designated parking areas. Don't park on the side of the road because the roads are very narrow. Have your emergency kit and come fully tanked up with gas. I think that those are the things that we, for safety reasons, are trying to get through to people. And we want everyone to be safe, and we also want everyone to have a good time and experience this once in a lifetime event. We do have a website, nhsolareclipse.com, if you want to look at any other information that we have up there. And here is my contact information. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. If I can help you with anything, I'm available at this email address. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. That's great. So we're going to shift now from Debbie's perspective at a statewide, thinking about this from a state level planning standpoint, to a more localized planning standpoint with John Brennenstill. Again, he, as I referenced earlier, he's a training officer for the town of Greenville, Maine Fire Department, and is kind of the local incident commander for Piscataquis County in Maine. And for those of you who don't know, Greenville is a very small, very remote community on the edge of a huge lake and millions of acres of undeveloped working forest land. So there's some other logistical questions that come into play there with private roads, private land ownership, a very remote community with very limited services. So John's been very proactive, engaging folks locally in thinking about some of these issues, even if they don't want to. And we welcome John now to share some of what he's been working on.
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm John Brennenstill. I'm the training officer for the Greenville Fire Department. I was kind of volunteered to take on the planning process for the town of Greenville, probably back in October. So a little bit behind time-wise, but the current fire chief and emergency manager was pretty busy with the building of a new fire station. So I kind of volunteered to take this on. Currently, we've been meeting with our local representatives, grocery stores, gas stations, that try to kind of advise them of, boosting how much fuel, extra food. Luckily, our one grocery store is used and accustomed to large amounts of people during the summertime. So they're going to kind of stock up for like a summer type event. Seeing that Greenville during the summertime does draw quite a crowd of people. Definitely not the crowd that we're kind of expecting from the solar eclipse. Our numbers are ranging anywhere from 7 to like 50,000 people. So it's kind of a broad number. So we're trying to prepare at least for the worst case number of people. So our emergency plan and incident action plan is going to be tailored kind of to those higher numbers and hope for maybe lower numbers, kind of like what everybody else is kind of touched on. April in Greenville can be an interesting time, especially the mild winter that we're having. Our lake is the largest mountainous lake in the eastern United States. So we could have anywhere from no ice, which would be preferable because that would kind of save on a lot of planning issues and people through the ice and things like that. Don't necessarily see ice being completely out. So we could have anywhere from a few inches to, a foot of ice in places. So that kind of becomes a challenge of, it's a large, wide open area, great for viewing, but how many people are we going to want on the ice if we don't want anybody on the ice, and how to keep people off the ice? So that's something we're working with the Forest Service and the game wardens to kind of come up with a plan of messaging and signage. The warden service is also working for like our backcountry areas and roads to kind of keep out some of our larger logging companies are going to try to close gates and restrict access to different areas to try to keep people out of those areas. So we're not having to worry about, backcountry rescues and going out and getting people when we're probably going to be slightly overwhelmed as it is. For those that aren't familiar with the Greenville area, most of our roads are one way in, one way out. So all this large amount of traffic that's coming in is only going to be able to go one direction. Trying to get mutual aid resources into the area is probably going to be near impossible. So we're kind of limited as it is on resources for fire department wise, EMS wise. We're trying to work on kind of getting more EMS resources into the area, but it's going to be a challenge. One of our other big things is Greenville does have a fairly decent sized airport with 2 runways that can accommodate larger corporate jet type aircraft. So researching other areas of the country, They had this solar eclipse a few years back. Some of the airports, there was one in Tennessee that was expecting 30 to 40 aircraft. They got like 300. So if we get 300 aircraft trying to come into Greenville on Monday, it's going to be a recipe for disaster. So we've been reaching out to Civil Air Patrol to try to get some help with possibly parking and marshaling aircraft, as well as the FAA, to maybe become a controlled airport for the day. Once again, depending on the weather, mud season, parking of aircraft is going to be very limited. Even if it's mud season, limited parking. If there's still snowbanks, we can't put aircraft where we normally do, like during the seaplane flying and stuff like that. So if this could happen in August, would be phenomenal, but obviously that's not what we're looking at. So we're trying to develop a very comprehensive plan to be able to at least cope with some of these issues. Greenville doesn't have a lot of parking, excess parking for visitors and stuff like that. It does sound like the school is going to be closed for the day, so we will have access to like the school parking lot, but that's still only a few hundred cars that we could fit there. So a lot of logistical issues that we're still trying to work through and designate areas. Some restaurants are still already closed during that time of year. So we're definitely have a plan in place. Fire department's going to go into operational periods on Friday through Monday and slowly boost staffing at the station around the clock, as well as EOC at the station, something that has never been done in the town of Greenville before, having an actual town-wide EOC. So it will definitely be great practice or training, if anything, if we don't see the numbers or the people. But that's kind of where we're at so far.
That's great, Jonathan. Actually, one quick question. What's an EOC?
Emergency Operations Center. Sorry.
Lingo for the emergency planners.
Exactly.
So
I always forget that.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And again, I'll point out to everyone, our last two speakers have really been focused on kind of safety and emergency planning for this event, which I think is not necessarily the funnest stuff to think about, but increasingly, I think based on experiences people have had in other parts of the country with these events, it can be a very serious piece of the experience, and fundamentally critical to people having a good experience and enjoying their time here. So we're going to shift now to St. Johnsbury and Jillian Sawaki, who's the executive director of Discover St. Johnsbury. And St. Johnsbury is a little bit of a shorter window of totality than some places. So Jillian's really thinking about that visitor experience and how people will enjoy that experience there. St. Johnsbury is also home to the Fairbanks Museum and Planetarium, so they have a unique asset to bring into the mix here. So Jillian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be able to be on this panel with so many folks who are doing amazing work at the regional level and at the local level. Things are going to be a little bit different in St. Johnsbury from some of the other communities that have been mentioned already. St. Johnsbury, Vermont is the largest town in a region that's called the Northeast Kingdom, which is 3 very, very rural counties that are tucked up against Canada and up against northern New Hampshire. In a very rural state. But Mike mentioned that we are just cross the line within the path of totality. So we expect to see around 90 seconds of totality as opposed to 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which is where it will be at the peak. So when folks are considering visiting St. Johnsbury for the eclipse, it's much lower volume of folks than, say, will be in Burlington, Vermont, or St. Albans, which are the largest population centers, and we'll see that peak totality. But we are also the home, as Mike mentioned, of the Fairbanks Museum and Planetarium, which is the only public planetarium in Vermont. I looked this up recently. We're also the only public planetarium in New England that falls within the path of totality. And we're one of very, very few science museums and science institutions in general within the path. And because the museum has that focus on astronomy, we expect to be an epicenter of a different type of visitation throughout that entire weekend. I first learned about the eclipse fairly early on. My dad happens to be an astronomy nerd, and he's on the board of a local nonprofit observatory, a private observatory located in the town where I live in Peacham, Vermont. So he's been talking about this, and he's an eclipse chaser for quite a while. And of course, with the Fairbanks Museum, who's a really close partner with Discover St. Johnsbury and a lot of things, we started these conversations a while back, but then we started to hear the numbers, right? I think that everyone who's a panelist here will recall that moment that we started to realize what the impacts could be on our communities. Yeah, visitation to some communities during eclipse events can be 50,000 to these very tiny towns that are about the same size as St. Johnsbury. And that got our attention, and we started pulling together a working group. I believe our first meetings were in June 2023, just to start looking at, make sure we're all connecting with each other, and planning for a great visitor experience to St. Johnsbury, seeing if we could learn more from the state and from other local partners about what to actually expect, and how the state would be promoting visitation. And I've been chairing those working group meetings, and they've been incredibly helpful. One of the big things that surfaced is, Michelle put this really well. It's not typical that you have this huge shared experience within a community. So we have a ton of experience within the Northern Forest of the impacts of foliage season tourism. So that's tens of thousands of people visiting our communities during that time period. You don't usually need to also think about most of the local population at the same time, and them all wanting to have the experience of that event together. We've been meeting every other month at first, now monthly, working with the Fairbanks Museum. They're the epicenter of visitation and the focus of our planning for the day of experience. They also have a very cool partnership with Vermont Public, which is the public radio and television broadcasting station. And they are going to be hosting a live stream on site with Jane Lindholm, who is the host of the But Why podcast, and Mark Breen, who's the lead meteorologist at the Fairbanks Museum. So that's actually a resource for our entire region. Anyone can tune in to either the radio station, their television station, or their live stream, which is going to be on YouTube, to hear moment-to-moment commentary from an experienced astronomer on the event that's happening right then and there. So we're getting closer and closer to the event. Michelle, I loved your countdown on your page about the eclipse, and dialing in, figuring out how many folks are reserving tickets for the on-site event, how many folks are planning to visit in the weekend leading up to the eclipse, and just getting excited for a community and visitor experience with everyone coming together.
Great. Thank you, Jillian. That's great. Thank you all. So now I think we will invite everyone to join us on screen and just have a little bit of a conversation with folks. I'll pose a few questions. Those of you who are joining us today, please again feel free to add questions to the Q&A here, and we will manage those as they come through. But we'll keep ourselves going for now, just this way. So first question, I think, for all of you, again, you're all obviously deep into the planning process. We may have people with us today who may not be quite as far ahead on this as you all are. So I'd be curious to hear how, as you've gotten into your planning processes, how have you thought about the stakeholders that need to be in the mix? Because again, this is a very broad-based experience, both from a business standpoint, a safety standpoint, all of this. So again, I encourage any or all of you to kind of weigh in a little bit. How have you thought about the stakeholders who need to be engaged here? And feel free to jump in.
I don't mind jumping in.
Okay.
You know, we as a team at RUS, we like, where do we start? It's that little overwhelming piece of where do we start? So we put together about a year ago what we call the Adirondack Solar Eclipse Task Force. And that included from across our regions, community leaders, some were elected officials, some were Chamber of Commerce, tourism offices from around the region. We included attractions, representatives from emergency services, New York State DEC, different mountain clubs, conservation groups, school districts, then some different business owners that represented a variety of different sectors, from lodging to restaurants. I may have said attractions already. I'm sorry, repeating myself. Putting that group together to start those initial conversations to kind of set that initial framework. Then throughout, as things have evolved, you know, there was different communities that, okay, we identified viewing areas in this community. So, you know, what's happening over here, and we'd identify different communities and keep moving through and kind of take our, what we call the Roost Roadshow for a while, going from community to community, setting up that initial information of, you know, not everyone has to host a big event, but the idea is to be prepared for that influx of visitors. That's where we started. Then we had some more topic specific conversations around emergency services, or, you know, help facilitate conversations on how to deal with backcountry use. And, you know, so it's been a little bit of a tiered level of the way that we approach things.
Others, anything to add there?
I think Michelle hit all of the major groups of stakeholders. One of the big ones for us was schools and school districts, tying in again to this idea of it's going to be an experience for everyone in your community, including the visitors, and knowing that the event falls at the very end of the school day, determining whether schools were going to be in session, whether they were going to host events on site, whether they were going to take a half day or a full day. That really affected how other community partners thought about how to plan for the amount of community members who we could reasonably expect to want to participate in events and activities. Because, you know, if you've taken care of all 300 or 600 or 1,000 students, maybe even their family members, and those are taking part in an event on site at the school, then that means that your participation in your community viewing event will be very different. So especially with the Fairbanks Museum, which is a science education hub, and we expect large numbers of families with children to be attending the event. For us, figuring out what our local school districts were planning to do was one of the first things to identify.
John, Debbie, anything more to add there?
I'd say that our school districts, half of them are canceling school for the day, and half of them are holding school all day. So we have to figure out how to, deal with both of those things, because the ones that do have school in session will have buses, and the ones that don't have school in session makes that part of. One good thing is it makes the facility available for supports, but it also puts more of the community out into the celebration, which is okay, which is good. But I think the stakeholder question is, they just unfolded. There's more and more stakeholders. The deeper you look, the more stakeholders there are, and that we found to be a little bit challenging. We broke ours up into subject matter like law enforcement and traffic control, health and medical, things like that for our subgroups. But every time you turn a page, there's more stakeholders. So it's a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really macro event with a lot of nuance into it, and a lot of subcategories there. How are you all how have you been approaching kind of projecting visitors? You know, think John, you referenced a pretty wide range. It could be 7,000, it could be 50,000. How are you gathering that data and kind of managing that yourselves and from a preparedness standpoint?
Well, we were kind of looking at, I looked back as far as the last solar eclipse that happened here in Maine, I believe it was 1964, and kind of looked at the numbers that came up to the Bangor area during that. Kind of used that number maybe kind of as a starting place, saying that, it's a lot more easily to travel today than it was in 1964, especially to more rural parts of Maine, roads, stuff like that. Looking at numbers from the previous solar eclipse in the country, just kind of Googling and researching what kind of numbers are being thrown out there, kind of base some of it off of the amount of short-term rentals that we have in Greenville and their capacities that they can hold, knowing that most of those have been booked since early last spring. A lot of our campgrounds will be closed, so we can't really go off those numbers of the type of camping and stuff. But then we do have so many secondary and vacation homes in Greenville, so that's why I can't really get a good hard number of the amount of people that are going to be here. But those are kind of the data that we use to guesstimate what we might see. So
We asked our Department of Transportation to look at what one of the most populated weekends was. For example, during fall foliage. I think somebody mentioned fall foliage and the amount of traffic that comes up during that time. And we use that as a key factor. Also the lodging numbers. And there's some websites out there that have projected the numbers, and the low end for us was about 6,000. And we thought, that's very low. And then, we go up to 30,000. So we picked somewhere between 10 and 20, and that's what we planned for. But we're also expecting impacts all the way up Route 93, which is right, the traffic driving up there will impact the entire state, really. So we've been looking at it from different areas and would rather project higher than lower.
Yeah, I know, John, I was in a session, some material that John shared at one point, his asking the question, in Greenville, would we rather see a headline after the event that says Greenville massively over prepares for the eclipse, or Greenville caught off guard by masses of people showing up unexpectedly? And I think we all know where the better headline there. Jillian or Michelle, thoughts on visitor numbers?
I could talk about, so St. Johnsbury, because we're on the edge of totality, we are not expecting to be the epicenter of visitation in Vermont during the eclipse. But we have a bunch of stuff going for us that makes it really hard to estimate those things. So we're at the terminus of Interstate 93. So anyone driving up on 93, where that spits you out. We're also on Interstate 91, which is a major throughway up to Canada. And obviously we expect to see tons and tons of traffic impacting both of those interstates and Route 2 and all of our smaller roads and back roads, especially immediately following the eclipse. And because we're the home of the Fairbanks Museum, we're going to have some visitation coming over anyway, just because folks are excited about that, having a premier place to go and experience the eclipse with that level of science interpretation behind what they can experience. All that said, we are expecting a much lower number than what I've been hearing so far. So for the on-site, we're looking at around 5,000 people. There will be events at the schools, which does help us with that in terms of local population. A lot of employers have already told us that they'll be hosting things on site. So our larger employers, we know that people are going to be taken care of that way. We do expect that there's a lot of folks are going to be driving through to their onward destinations, and we do expect major impacts at the museum all weekend long leading up to the eclipse. So that's actually where we expect to see the bulk of the visitation. So if folks are driving to Burlington or St. Albans to watch the event with that 3 minutes and 30 seconds, most of the hotels in the area are requiring minimum stays. So they'll be here for the entire weekend. Oh, why not drive out to St. Johnsbury for a planetarium show at the Fairbanks Museum? We also know from lodging partners in St. Johnsbury that they're not fully booked yet. There is unusual activity for Random Monday in April, but there is still capacity. We have reservation and inquiry forms on both my own town website about the eclipse, on the Fairbanks Museum's website about the eclipse, and Vermont Public. And the numbers of reservations and inquiries through those are around 200 or 300 altogether, which is a manageable number so far. So we're thinking in that 5,000 range, which is for us akin to sort of a normal large event in the town. So that's where we're going with this.
Michelle, anything more?
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of been talking about it. It's definitely like there are the knowns. We know in our conversations, we've said since the beginning, sharing information was going to be key, and it's definitely proved to be the point. Lodging occupancy across the region are at almost full occupancy, if not at full, depending on where you're at. Towards the center line, we anticipate that numbers are going to be much higher. Very few attractions are having like selling tickets. So, traditional ticket sales are not something that we have as much capacity to track. There is some that we're looking at. We're tracking. We built a dashboard of all the different Eclipse pages across all of our different sites to just track and monitor activity and information. But again, we're really, that's one of the things about that task force is sharing information. If there's, as soon as they start to see those upticks in reservations, even last April, when that 1 year mark came, they were starting to share information. So I encourage all to share information. We know what our overnight visitation will be like. Its day trip will really swing dramatically based on weather we anticipate.
I know we're talking a lot about logistics and safety here. I'm going to stay on those questions for a couple more questions in this vein, but then we will shift to some of the other things that people are doing to just make people have fun during the eclipse. But key to having fun is making sure that everyone's safe and that we're not overrunning our communities. This is a question that I think any of you could go into a lot of minute detail on, so we want to be a little careful with our time, but just thinking about basic community infrastructure, traffic, trash, toilets, things like that. Do you want to share share your experience and kind of how you're approaching managing, again, just like really basic necessities with crowds coming into communities?
I guess, typically we have the seaplane flying up here in Greenville. Of course, it's, in the month of September when there's not snow and stuff like that. So we have reached out for like additional porta potties. Of course, this event is probably going to be, it's going to cost the town, obviously, money. Our businesses will probably make some money, but it's kind of a financial burden actually on our town to bring in additional porta potties and trying to get, trash receptacles out in places where we normally pile snow, and there's usually snow banks there still. So, trying to figure out where to place those, you don't want to put them right in the middle of sidewalks and stuff like that where people are going to be walking. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, especially like porta potty placement with snowbanks still being in place. It's definitely not the greatest time of year. So it's stuff that we're looking at, trying to get porta potties. I know there's been a large, obviously, request for porta potties in the state of Maine. So, there's only so many to go around. There are some some public restrooms in the town of Greenville to start with, but I think we have 6 altogether, which is not going to be nearly enough for the amount of crowds that we could see. That's kind of where we're at with that.
Mhm. One approach we took with those community meetings that we were talking about is having them before a lot of the snow started to fly, to try to identify locations for parking that might typically be dump zones for snow, to find alternative locations to make sure that the hard surface areas were available for parking. Right now we're working on a major like signage plan to make sure, because not all the parking areas are typically ones that people would naturally go to, especially for where they're actually trying to view from. So a lot of a major signage project is underway right now.
I would say porta potties feature very heavily in the conversation, and John mentioned that already. And I would encourage any folks who expect visitation to your community that you feel like you don't necessarily have the public restroom infrastructure to make those reservations right away. Get hooked up pretty fast.
Well, speaking of just to kind of talk about the weather piece a little bit more, as we've all acknowledged, April 8th could be a very unpredictable time of year at any time, and we're having a milder, at least so far, a milder than usual winter. Who knows what will happen in the next month and a half. Given that uncertainty, how are you approaching planning for multiple, potential weather scenarios?
Very loaded question. It's going to be 80 and sunshiny like it was in 2023, which for the record, it was 80. I was at Whiteface Mountain and it was in the 80s and I was skiing on April 8th. So, some things that we are looking at, and some of our major attractions are also looking at weatherproof activities. Some of them that have the equipment or have reserved equipment for like jumbotrons, et cetera, to watch live streams of that are part of their event. Regardless, will be outdoors. We'll be watching live streams of the eclipse from Texas on up, making alternative locations for people to go inside there. I think the conversation that everyone was having with regard to preparation and making sure everyone's prepared is really getting that message out to prepare for winter driving. Making sure you have all of the essentials in your vehicle is one of the pieces that we have: blankets, water, shovels, all the things that you would want if you're going on a winter road trip, even if it is April, because the weather can turn quick. And that's the advice we're providing.
That's the same advice that we're providing too, is to, be self-sufficient and be careful, and be prepared for any weather. We also have the added issue of hikers, and we're a little bit concerned about people wanting to see the eclipse from the top of a mountain. And in either case, mud season or ice and snow, it would not be safe to do so at that time. I think they're going to spend some time in the communities and with the different forestry groups looking at how to keep those trails closed.
Segue off that, actually, I think that's a good point. I know this has come up in a number of communities. How are you addressing, again, this is looking for a little more detail, I think, Debbie, than what you were just referencing. How are you addressing backcountry safety, risk management, eclipse-oriented, leave no trace? Other thoughts on that? Yeah, a little more detail on that backcountry question. And I think that, and this also relates, we could package this up with, are you taking steps to work with or support private landowners who may be in a position of having to manage significant public pressure on their lands?
Well, I'll just say that we have our Cultural and Natural Resources Department on our committee, the Forestry, Fish and Game, the county sheriffs, things like that. But that is one of the biggest challenges, I think, is to, protect the land, protect the trails, and protect the people who might want to use them. But that's something that's sort of ongoing in an everyday world as well. But they're preparing in a heightened way right now. I guess that didn't really answer your question, but I don't have very many details on that, but I do know that it's a challenge for those groups.
I think it applies not only to backcountry hiking and hiking activities, but also paddling as well.
Mhm.
I think this was one of the first things when we started working on it, was like, oh no, time of year was where our minds immediately went. And so we created some great partnerships to really create a unified message that we've been continuously amplifying about, really what conditions are like on the trails, and then trying to deter them to more positive experiences, and setting up that infrastructure, looking to make sure as soon as people are getting off of 87 and heading into the Adirondacks, having that information as well. That, the Eclipse also from the top of a mountain to the ground is, still so far away, it's going to look the same. But I do keep seeing articles, some of the first articles I saw when they're just randomly picking places along the path, and they announced Mount Marcy, our highest peak, as the location to go. And then we reached out and requested that be removed, and they turned it to, the next one recommendation was on Mirror Lake, which is right in the heart of Lake Placid. Not also where you're going, so it's those water and mountains are what people naturally think, and they're the two things we're trying to deter them from. But that's what sets the backdrop. So we're just, the unique communities with that backdrop is in the experiences.
Yeah, in St. Johnsbury, we also are home to Dog Mountain, which is a bucolic 150-acre dog park. It's a world-renowned attraction. And originally, they were so excited to be a viewing location. But of course, they are on a dirt road that actually, among all of the dirt roads in the community, is pretty notorious for being one of the worst roads during mud season anyway. And then their beautiful, beautiful trails are usually impassable that year, to say nothing of parking on site. So it took a while to get around to talking to them about the true impacts of what they're going to be seeing on site. Almost certainly folks are going to show up there anyway, whether or not their messaging is clear and direct saying please stay away, or even if it's just visitation during the weekend rather than folks trying to go and see the eclipse there on site. Messaging, it sounds like, is the tool that other folks are using, same in St. Johnsbury. And I have heard that the state of Vermont is going to be pushing out their messaging pretty aggressively, identifying natural areas where people can go and safely view this, just like they do every mud season. Yeah. But
one thing we tried to do, we started last summer while thinking our summer visitors might be ones that would be one of our most natural audiences to return for the eclipse, was to we put coasters in all of the restaurants and bars that had a QR code that went right to that information about like what to know before you come. So because at that point we didn't have even a lot of the events solidified to really start marketing those, so we were just marketing that messaging.
I was going to say, up here in Greenville, speaking with forestry and the warden service, they're trying to get signage up on a lot of our, mud season roads and a lot of the private logging lands and stuff to try to keep people from, going into those areas. Of course, people ignore signs and stuff like that. So obviously, as much signage and blockages you can get put up. The fact of the lake, there's so much lake that it'd be near impossible to put up enough signage to let people know to stay off the ice, or people ignore that anyways and do what they're going to do. So hopefully, if we do have enough ice, like the warden service is going to have a few snowmobile patrols and stuff like that on the lake to try to keep people maybe out of areas that are less ice than the thicker areas, and to kind of monitor, almost police patrol the lake for anything anything else that might be going on.
I think this will be my last like logistics and safety question. I think there's an expectation that post event, after this 3.5 minutes of experience, there could be a lot of traffic. Like that's kind of going to be a moment. Do you have thoughts on how you all are approaching or thinking about that potential exodus moment in the late afternoon on a Monday?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty awful by all accounts. Heard universally from other communities that have shared their experience of total solar eclipses. Interestingly, for St. Johnsbury, it might be an opportunity because we are at the confluence of all of those highways. People might not be able to get onto the highway. So we're expecting good number of folks to be stuck in town and are encouraging businesses to host at least a few after parties. So to be honest, it's a little bit hard to predict because we also hear from communities that did put a lot of effort into their after party experiences that there's that huge exodus immediately afterwards. Some of that is messaging. So putting up on some of those safety warnings, please expect a lot of traffic immediately after the event. Some of it's creating designating parking areas and an in-town shuttle so that there's at least some separation between groups of people, not all trying to leave the same exact parking lot all at the same time. But it sounds like back roads, highways are going to be backed up for quite a while.
Same. I would say that's one of the things that we fear the most. But we do have some experience from the NASCAR races that we have every year, and that's pulling, changing traffic patterns, and our Department of Transportation is very good at that and can turn traffic around to be the smoothest influx and outgo as they can, having that experience under their belts. But that is a similar situation, although depending on how many people we get, it could be much larger or much smaller.
Other thoughts? So I'll flip it now and to shift from thinking about the immediate experience after the eclipse to thinking about before the eclipse. Because I think we all recognize this is on a Monday. The event itself is very short, talking about a 3.5 minute experience here, but also anticipating a lot of people. And from a business standpoint, really trying to, curious what folks are thinking and how you're approaching the opportunity to attract people prior to the event, bring them into your community, get them established, and provide experiences for them that will essentially be supportive of local businesses. So they'll be staying longer, they'll be there longer to spend money in the community. Curious how you all are approaching thinking about kind of pre-eclipse activities and planning.
I can jump in on this one for a little bit. Some of our initial conversations around that come early, stay late were really about encouraging activity leading up to. And so in many of our communities, there's we've got most of our schedules aren't just about April 8th. It's everything we're putting out is about from the 4th through the 9th, 10th, trying to have that array. I know one thing that was a unique opportunity or kind of conversation and continues to be is that is the time of year, it's dead center in the middle of our spring breaks here. And so a lot of businesses typically actually just close down and leave that time of year. And I think staff capacity is a big piece. And I think the unknowns are another big piece of, how many people exactly, is it too many for us to serve at a restaurant? Is it, or the other side is, do I buy so much product and not be able to move it? And then I'm in the middle of April with extra product. So I think those were a lot of the conversations And again, we've been sharing information. We've been sharing what we do now, the occupancy numbers. We're sharing, you know, information on the ideas of a lot of our restaurants are staying open, but they're doing more of a reduced menu so they can kind of move product more quickly. And rather than doing big specials, they're doing more like just they're naming those maybe that reduced menu with fun themed dishes, things along those lines. There's lots of art shows and other activities like that to show off other parts of the communities. And so there's a variety of like tools we put together with ideas that just got people thinking about ways they could, you know, turn this into an opportunity for them and how they can do that, on which many are running on a skeleton staff at that time.
Yeah, similarly, staffing pressures is a big concern. We've been communicating with businesses that, especially hospitality businesses, that entire weekend is going to be a big opportunity for them. And yeah, I still am waiting to hear from most of them whether they plan to be open that Sunday night, which is usually a quiet night. And certainly that Monday is usually when we have one restaurant open for dinner in St. Johnsbury. So I'm continuing to share that message. We actually have a business mixer at the Fairbanks Museum this Friday, where I'm going to just be highlighting that message again. And, you know, the way that planning and staffing goes, a lot of those decisions might be made in the weeks leading up to the event. Similarly, we're encouraging events that are taking place that weekend to highlight the great stuff that we have going in town, taking advantage of all of that visitation that we expect to see to the Fairbanks Museum. April is Poetry Month in Vermont, or I think it's just Poetry Month everywhere. So highlighting poetry events, it's a really nice arts and culture experience as well. We also, at the end of the month, have our large maple festival for the town. So usually during the month of April, I kick off a maple menu takeover. So we're thinking about that as a way to also showcase the fact that it's maple sugaring season during the time that this event is taking place. Wouldn't it be great if it also coincided with the Maple Open House weekend? It doesn't, but it is what it is. It's probably not great to encourage all of those visitors to go on the dirt back roads to the local sugar houses anyway. But we are, you know, similar to what Michelle's doing, we have a centralized page on our website that highlights all of the events that we know about so far that are taking place that weekend, and we'll be continuing to populate that. The state of Vermont has a lot of dedicated effort specifically around events that are taking place that weekend, I think trying to spread people out throughout the state. So we're looking forward to that as well.
John, Debbie, I think that question is probably a little less in your sweet spot in terms of thinking about the programming, but if you have anything to add, jump in.
Yeah, we've kind of left that to like Destination Moosehead and some of the other groups to kind of organize any activities and food trucks and things like that they're thinking about bringing in. So kind of out of my wheelhouse.
Mine too. Travel and tourism gets involved in that, and also the communities themselves and their businesses.
So this is an interesting question from one of our participants. Given that ideally you want to, you know, we don't necessarily want people scattering way out into the backcountry all over the place. We want to try to, you know, manage people, keep people in town as much as possible. Has it come up anywhere? Has the idea come up of encouraging municipalities, businesses, private residences to turn their lights off during the totality to improve the viewing experience from in town? It's something that hadn't occurred to me at all until this comment's kind of interesting.
That is interesting, but I didn't occur to us either. The towns themselves are so small that it's going to spill over anyway. But it's an interesting question. Yep.
We have talked about street lights and making sure those are off, because some of them are run on sensors and would automatically turn on. So that's a conversation. For the most part, this will be happening during a time when it would be light out. So aren't going to be that many businesses who would usually have their lights on, except for interior lights, so I expect that street lights will be one of the bigger impacts.
One of our kind of quick, the top of our list of like, what should I know if I'm planning an event at my location, is if you have automatic sensor lights to turn those down or turn those off, or only keep ones on that are for like pure emergency standpoint too.
So this is also a comment. I'm going to try to catch this. This is a little bit technical, but this is actually a point of interest. I'll follow up with a question. This is from Bill Jarvis. Because we're nearing the peak of the current solar cycle, which is a time when there's increased solar activity, viewers should be able to see the sun's corona more easily and might see kind of what is referred to as coronal mass ejections, large expulsions of plasma and magnetic fields from the sun's corona. In 2017, it was a period of low activity. So there are a lot of people who are anticipating that this could actually be a much better, weather permitting, could be a much better viewing experience than the last total solar eclipse. The related question I would ask is, how are you approaching and where are you recommending that folks get solar viewing glasses from? I know you're working on this.
Currently, the local hospital, Northern Light in Dover and in Greenville, are going to have a supply of glasses, but that's all I'm aware of at the moment for our area.
We had worked with the Adirondack Sky Center Observatory to, one thing I'll say is I know where my bandwidth is, and when it comes to getting into the nitty-gritty of science and making sure that ordering glasses are the right certified glasses, was out of our area of expertise. So we partnered with them, who were already kind of had a reputable source, created branded glasses for the region, and then we're bulk buying them. And so that businesses could order from that and get those discounted rates and get the quantities that they want. That has been available since May 11th of 2023 and will close tomorrow is our last day for sales in order to secure glasses in time. We've also personally or not personally me, but our organization Roost has ordered and worked with the counties that we represent to get some stockpile glasses for each of our communities for their kind of free community viewing areas. I know a lot of the attractions have been ordering them themselves and doing branded glasses for their actual attractions, whether it's the ski centers or the Wild Center in Tupper Lake, for example, that those glasses are coming in. So just some examples. But if anyone needs if anyone wants Adirondack glasses, they can order them between now and 5 p.m. tomorrow evening.
The American Astronomy Society, sorry, I got that. American Astronomy Society has a recommended list of suppliers, which the Fairbanks Museum really quickly sent out so that we are aware of that. I can actually drop that link in the chat. And the prices for their wholesale orders are going up, so I recommend folks take a look at that if you want to buy branded glasses particularly. The state of Vermont is providing free glasses to any community that requests them. And then, yeah, we've been looking at this as a merchandising opportunity as well. So the Fairbanks Museum is creating branded glasses. We expect those to be pretty popular. Discover St. Johnsbury is going to be creating specific St. Johnsbury glasses, which we're going to be providing at cost to any local business that wants to provide them for their employees, and then also selling at the Welcome Center. I was just wrapping up an email chain with the Fairbanks Museum to make sure we think we have enough glasses on site just this morning. So it's certainly something to consider. Amazon is also selling them super cheaply right now. am not clear on whether any of those are the recommended suppliers. So that's just important for folks to be aware of that.
Mhm.
I have been hearing of scams of folks saying that they're certified glasses when they are not. So
I also know there was a lot of libraries, there was grants that went around last year that applied for and had received like up to 1,000 pairs. So a lot of libraries in our area also have a stockpile. So something just to note of. The one thing we've been really conscious of is a lot of the glasses are here. They're all in back rooms hidden because we don't want to hand them out in advance because they'll be crumpled up in the bottom of the vehicle, just like the one pair that I had as a sample. They worked for quite a while. They still, they still come together, but my traveling roadshow pair are not the pair that I trust on my eyes for April.
Great, thanks for putting that link in there, Jillian. I think folks might be seeing, it looks like in Maine, Maine Office of Tourism is going to have glasses available at the visitor centers for folks coming into the state. One other question, circling back, we talked a little bit about the logistics around schools and managing schools being open, closed, when kids are getting out. Are folks familiar or aware of work that schools are doing to deliver Eclipse education and training sessions for educators for how they engage with students around this stuff?
sure, sorry, I am muted myself. The Fairbanks Museum, as a science and astronomy education hub, has been working with Whimsy. I am going to forget what that acronym is, White Mountain Science and something else, to provide training sessions for local educators at schools in different areas of Vermont and New Hampshire. So I know that has been taking place actively. I would also say if you encounter schools, if any communities encounter schools that are looking for a resource, the live stream that the Fairbanks Museum is going to be doing in partnership with Vermont Public is a great way to get that day of science interpretation information. Obviously, NASA is going to be doing a live stream as well. So there are a lot of resources for day of activities and interpretation, and Whimsy and the Fairbanks Museum are currently continuing to work with local educators.
They may not have the specific site for the live broadcast, but do you want to drop a link to any Fairbanks Museum resources into the chat for folks? Again, I think that is a unique resource that's available for people across the region. And I don't know if you said this. I had a question. If it's cloudy everywhere, is NASA going to be somehow projecting, like, are they going to be above the clouds to be able to share images and viewing opportunities that way? I'm asking for what you know about NASA's plans.
If you want, I can jump in. I know so we have a similar entity here in the Adirondacks. It's the Adirondack Sky Center and Observatory, who will be doing some streams of like the NASA broadcast that I've been told you can be able to see it above the clouds, and have also been told that regardless of the weather, it's a very unique and cool experience where it's almost more like Armageddon-like as it approaches darkness. So there's those two pieces. Back to your first question there, similarly, they're doing a lot of programming where they're going to the schools and have been working on, education within the schools. Most of our schools are on spring break during that time. So they're not in school, but they have worked with the 3 counties and the local BOCES program to provide glasses for every single student. So those will be going home again that very last minute before spring break, hopefully to save the glasses long enough.
So I think I think we've kind of worked through our questions. If any viewers have final questions, if you want to drop them in. we could do that. But we're coming up towards our time here, so I would like to ask each of our panelists, just give each of you another minute or so to share any final thoughts. Again, thoughts or advice on that you would encourage folks to be thinking about in the coming months as this event approaches.
I just wanted to mention, it looks like the Fairbanks Museum doesn't have a link to those educational resources on their website, but Catherine Ingram posted the Echo Vermont's list of links, which is right there. Any educators who are interested in more information can contact the Fairbanks Museum to see if there are any upcoming trainings, though.
There is a comment in the chat also for folks about glasses for Mickey Mullen at the Minnesota Tourism, where she could, I don't know if she'll send them to people outside of Maine, but she'll have to manage that. But she has shared her email address as a source of classes also. So with that, again, I encourage each of you to share any last thoughts, comments, advice for folks in Northern Forest communities as this event approaches.
I think the one thing just to always consider too is this is a time I think that within our small communities, volunteers are going to be a key piece to success or a struggle here. So, a lot of our communities are really working to kind of get more people involved, get the community involved more, enrich that experience of, finding fun ways to volunteer and get involved in this. So something to be mindful of. Again, this is a unique shared experience and everyone will remember what they're doing.
I guess my last piece of advice is the same as my first, is to encourage people to be prepared, to be self-sufficient, to be safe, yet have a good time and experience the eclipse.
I would kind of echo the same thing of being prepared for whatever weather we could see here in northern Maine, and probably bring a lot of patience with you if you're driving, that you may be stuck in your car for a long period of time, not going anywhere. So having patience and being kind to one another that may be stuck in traffic with you.
Good advice anytime.
One thing that came up on our planning call for this webinar was, is it too late for communities to start planning for this eclipse? And I would say, no, there's definitely still time to buy your glasses. There's still a little bit of time to get your porta potties done. But, not all of our communities are going to be the absolute epicenter of visitation. Of course, it's going to be unusual visitation for that time period in April, but there's definitely time to get your communities rallied together and plan something that's really fun for visitors and for residents alike.
Great. Well, thank you all for taking the time, and I think first of all for the work that you're doing locally to help manage this event, and then for taking the time to join us and share your experience with everyone here. I believe we'll be dropping an evaluation link into the chat, so if you see that, please take a moment to send us any thoughts or feedback on this webinar. You'll also receive a follow-up email with a link to that evaluation form and a recording of the webinar that you can share with others as helpful. Also want to share with everyone that, as I referenced at the beginning, this webinar is part of an ongoing series that the Northern Forest Center hosts. The next upcoming topic is on March 19th, again from 12 to 1:30. And the title of this one is Getting Ahead of the Flood Risk. How can communities proactively mitigate for floods? So again, another timely and very real topic for issues that communities across the region are responding to. Also, we encourage everyone, keep an eye out for other upcoming webinars and to subscribe to the Northern Forest News Digest, which is a great clearinghouse of information about issues across forest economy, community issues, policy issues across the Northern Forest. And we'll have a link to that in the follow-up email that we send you all as well. And I think with that, we will say thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.